What's up everyone? Alex here. When growing up in the 90s, I noticed that there was a huge obsession with natural disasters at the time. Universal Studios opened up the Earthquake Studio Tram experience in 1989, and between 1996 and 1998, we saw movie studios release Twister, Volcano, Deep Impact, Armageddon, and many other disaster films that have faded into history. All of these experiences, especially Universal Studios' Earthquake, attempted to capture the drama of what it was really like to be stuck in a natural disaster. But what about video games? As it turns out, the Disaster Report series, long absent in the West since the PS2 days, has been trying to fill this void for quite some time, and with the announcement that Disaster Report 4 will be coming soon, it made me wonder if the extra development time between games really improved upon the experience from the previous games. Thanks to the folks at NIS America, I was able to venture forth into the game's crumbling cityscapes and find this out for myself. So join me on this journey, but make sure you watch your step as we take a look at Disaster Report 4. Disaster Report 4 is a follow-up to a long-running series of games spanning several console generations, originally developed by IREM, but now developed by the same key people at Granzella. Normally, this is the part of the review when I talk about the game's premise, and to give some flavor to the character. However, the main character of Disaster Report 4 is of the player's own design, from what you actually look like to what kind of backstory you'd like to imbue onto your on-screen avatar. This sets the stage perfectly for a game that's got a lot of ambition, but with gameplay that's actually a lot more familiar than one might derive from seeing it in action. In fact, its trailers might make you think that Disaster Report 4 is a hybrid action-adventure/survival game. This makes a lot of sense. After all, whenever you hear the word disaster, images of volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, typhoons, fire, tsunamis, and the like fill your mind, with these words conjuring up images of kinetic and frantic situations, often spiking your adrenaline high up to prepare for what comes next. The reality is that Disaster Report 4 has more in common with old-school point-and-click adventure games than what the trailer might make you think. Yes, you're still an individual who's trapped in the middle of a city, desperately trying to escape. And yes, you do have a thirst meter and a hunger meter, but there are no action sequences that require a high amount of dexterity, nor are there split-second decisions that need to be made in order to progress the game forward. In fact, most of my deaths came from not clearly seeing what buildings or structures were actually about to fall on me, ultimately costing me a good portion of my health bar and adding some unneeded stress onto my person. I even ran my character ragged through my playthroughs, barely paying any attention to my thirst or my hunger. That said, Disaster Report 4's progression is divided into small areas of the city, with different events and individuals trying to survive within. In each area, you'll need to figure out a way to advance by helping out other trapped individuals. This is done by going out and finding other people or items, or even persistently speaking to them until they give you what you want. Outside of its traditional adventure game roots, you also have access to a run button, a map, your backpack, the ability to brace yourself from aftershocks and crawl, and a curious scream button that, at least for my playthroughs, didn't seem all too useful. That one added feature sets the tone for a side of Disaster Report 4 that I've been reluctant to talk about: its lack of focus. If my review so far has been any indication, the kinds of peril brought forth by the game's natural disasters isn't as big of a deal as some of the peril that its characters bring forth. It's like The Walking Dead, where the people are often more dangerous than its shambling zombie horde. In Disaster Report 4's case, the natural disasters are a side motif, a thematic element to the drama that the game tries to tell with its characters. The problem with this drama, however, is that the game doesn't know when to tell its own story or to give its reins to you. I mentioned earlier that you're given agency on what you look like, why you went to the city, to other things like why you wanted to escape the city. Outside of, falling buildings, fire, and other natural disasters happening? This player agency is undermined by the plentiful opportunities you're given on how you'll react to the game's many characters, making you think how much of these choices really matter in the end. And after playing through the game a couple of times, even I can't give you a straight answer. Which brings me to the unfortunate side effect of Disaster Report 4's lack of focus: obfuscation. One of the many problems traditional point-and-click adventure games tried to solve over the past few decades is how to make pixel hunting, or the act of mashing a button to find a single interactive-looking object in the world, more of an intuitive experience. In modern game design, this is usually done by highlighting objects that you can interact with via the use of labels, direct lighting, or some sort of vision that allows you to highlight interactable objects. Disaster Report 4 has none of these modern conveniences. And coupled with just how large some of its areas can be, it's easy for impatient players like myself to get frustrated and walk away from the experience entirely. A good example of this obfuscation affecting the pace of the game significantly is the game's starting area, which is available as a playable demo right now. For a solution that took about 10 minutes to do a second time through, the search for this solution took upwards of about an hour to unravel. And while it is correct to say that finding the solution should be when players derive their enjoyment of its eventual discovery, the game's lack of tutorial in the beginning, outside of telling players how to use the crawl button to get out of the demo area, almost feels like it was left out on purpose, with its developers hoping that we would organically find a solution to its many puzzles. An example of when these lack of tutorials become a problem is when you're asked to come up with a solution without knowing what you have to work with. One section of the game required you to push against a particular object to climb over to get to another portion of the area. But there were no prompts to tell you if it was an interactable object, nor does the game tell you that you're required to push against said object in order for you to climb it. You just simply needed to know somehow that it would work. In a later part of the game, there was a hint that there could be a path that could be explored beyond an obstacle that could be broken through, which prompted me to try and look for something to smash it with, only to have a completely separate and random event destroy said obstacle. The problem with relying on your players to organically find solutions without any sort of gameplay foundation or aid is that if there's one organic thing that happens during a natural disaster is that we want to flee to a safe area as safely and as quickly as humanly possible. And the fact that no one in the city is acting how they should during a natural disaster makes you feel like you're missing something somehow, ultimately pulling you out of the experience. As players, we still need to understand the vocabulary of the game and learn its rules. And sadly, Disaster Report 4 does the absolute minimum to help players along. The thing is, the idea of helping people get through many of the problems that Disaster Report 4 throws at us is something that I absolutely wanted to indulge in. And as silly as it must be for its citizens to be carrying on with their daily lives during a huge calamity, this behavior reminds me of our present-day situation. Accidental or as timely as one might see it, Disaster Report 4 asks if we're prepared to adapt to a new normal if our city or nation is struck by a massive calamity. And, much like real life, its citizens have varying perspectives on this question. But at every corner, I'm always reminded of the game's shortcomings. The game's performance, while better than previous games, is still really inconsistent, and the game's visuals don't match its own ambition. And these performance hits occurred on a PS4 Pro. There have also been plenty of times where characters I've escorted would get stuck in places for no apparent reason, only to be warped to another location later on. Some of my peers have said that perhaps the reason for these inconsistencies is that the game was actually in development for a very long time, citing the 2011 Tohoku earthquake being the reason for its initial cancellation, with fans of the series convincing its developers to revive the project once more. But there have been many notable games that were deeply affected by said calamity that turned out great in the end, which begs the question of why Disaster Report 4 turned out to be, well, its own kind of disaster. It breaks my heart to admit that Disaster Report 4 is a game that I had a really difficult time getting into. I felt that the game's rocky, torn-apart atmosphere is a fitting metaphor that represents its many disparate ideas just not quite coming together in the end. I do believe that patient players who can see past its many issues will find a game that delivers a unique and interesting take on adventure games. But I highly encourage the rest of us, especially at its going price at launch, to download and play the available demo and make a decision based on their experience there. Despite this, I am still glad to have experienced this game overall, and I am optimistic about the series' future. No other game tries to tackle this kind of subject matter than Disaster Report does, and I am hoping that, if a sequel is in the works, that its developers focus on making it a tighter, more cohesive experience.